Michael, before we get started, I just want to share screen for a moment and
Sure.
go to the website and then to the workshops here and to display this page for those who don't have it or don't aren't paying attention. This is the bio, so you keep scrolling down. There's the video from week one, and there's a little note on the Moravians here. There's this link to Sea Garden, and then week two will go in here, and then Um, up here you see, where is it? Did I put it up here? Oh my God. Here's comment page right here. So you click on this comment page and then it's the dialogue. And that's the way this is
Hey, cool.
image that Scott sent that goes along with his comment. You can't post images. Poor Bakersfield. Yeah. Well, that's probably a running theme. But in any event, he sent this and I said, see above. So that's what he's referencing. Um, the National Gallery of London um, exhibit devoted to St. Francis. So
Uh,
you can see the image there. So just to again to show you how to get there, I'll just the main page for the workshop is right here. I'll drop that in the chat again, and then the comment page is right here. So can't do images, but just about anything else, and be a good place to have dialogue. And hopefully we can channel it in there because this this video and this course, all that's involved in it will serve as a record for future seekers,
oh,
future
God.
Duncan fans. Well, you're up to it, Michael. You're up to it.
I don't know about that, man.
Keep going, guy. So,
Am I
um,
imagining things, or did that painting look like it could have been done by Jess Collins?
The one of St. Francis?
The one that he just showed.
Yeah. Let's see it again. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. It has some Jess elements. I'm thinking of
It
this right.
does.
Isn't that something?
Where did you find that? That's
Scott sent it. Scott, you want to give us a quick
Yeah, I went to I was in London a year ago, June, and there was a show at the National Gallery on the pre-Raphaelites.
ah,
And it was an amazing show. But down in the basement, they had this. Well, I think it was temporary show of St. Francis material, starting from back in the Middle Ages and up until some of the current renderings of St. Francis. And this one, is the stigmata, receiving the stigmata, um, the drop of wax. And anyway, I have this on my phone, so it resonated for me, and there it is. And some remarkable work of renditions of Saint Francis. A lot of the wolf, which is one of my favorite bits of Saint Francis, is his befriending the wolf. But there's a remarkable array of images.
No, Jim,
thanks, thanks, Scott.
Jimmy. Well,
Yes.
I couldn't tell.
Couple of other things I want to just bring your attention to. There are the workshops, Life as Rehearsal for the Poem, and Poetics as Cosmology coming up in a couple of weeks.
who's
I'm
doing
still
that? Is somebody leading?
I'm leading those two workshops. They're basically the
Oh,
same
cool.
workshop, two different names. In fact, if we go to that, you can get a sense of what we're into for this. Uh, they're both here, so there's a registration for it, and then the course materials will be up there. And we provide a writing exercise that people do and then bring to the workshop and do a check-in about it. We're working on workshops on the occult Diana Prima for January and also a workshop on Chinook jargon by Harold Renish, BC poet, also for January. Matt Treese's workshop, Poet as Radio, continues, and he'll be offering that again sometime in the winter. And I should just one last screen share is our Cascadia. What did I not share the right thing here? The Cascadia Poetry Festival, let me see, let me go back one. That's on my personal page. So the Cascadia Poetry Festival, just to give you a sense of the poets involved, some of the poets involved. Brenda Cardenas and Zach Charles, Local Young Man. Jim Dodd, who's got a book coming out from Watershed Press. Roberto Harrison, who's published by City Lights. Brenda Hillman, Alicia Hokinson, local poet. Robert Lashley, our own Lauren Medley, who's in the house. Ria Molina, Gabriela, and other folks. So that's coming up. Roxy Power, Robert Michael Pyle, Lepidopterist. That's coming up October 10th through the 12th, and it's the 9th one of these festivals we've done. With that said, I'll move it right on to our intrepid host, Michael Boughn, for you to lead us through week 2.
Hi, everybody. That was pretty fun, wasn't it, that chapter? It's like he just gets going, and it's amazing. It's really amazing. So why do you think Eros is, I mean, if you look at the first 2 chapters as sort of preface, his inception and birth as a poet. And then we go into Eros, like right away. So why Eros? Why do you think Eros? What does Eros mean to you? Anybody?
Well, I mean, it has to do somewhat with the kind of Venusian power, with the kind of life force, the sexual energy in part, but also the myth that has to do with bringing things out of from the dark and into the light.
Uh-huh. Well, it's generative. I mean, he takes us from what he calls a primitive Eros, like the pre-Homer, pre-Hesiod, a kind of state of, I mean, it's imaginary. Like he doesn't know. He's never nobody reporting from that. But it's a state of chaos. It's like a chaotic. It's desire. It's love. It's lust. It's
It's the word undefined. There's a word I'm searching for in that old Eros, in that rigid Eros. It's as if it's there in the chaos, but the heat hasn't come to it yet.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in some ways, if he's looking at, he gives us a historical unfolding of events. And in that history, this is like the pre-human Eros. It's the Eros of what we want to say, bare nature, like I mean, I don't want to, I'm not animal Eros, it's the Eros before there is a symbolic meaning associated with it. And he goes from there to this. I just found this quite extraordinary. I hadn't read this in a while. And just the very opening of chapter 3, the work, the ground, and Eros lie at the heart of our study here. Well, so there you are. It's the heart. This is the heart of things. That's why we're starting here.
Yep.
And we have to consider what that means, that this is the heart of things. The work itself, this is let me start over again. The work, the ground, and eros lie at the heart of our study here. The work itself is the transformation of the ground. In this ground, the soul and the world are one in a third hidden thing, in imagination of which the work arises. There is so much to unpack in those three sentences.
Yeah.
No?
Hmm?
First of all, what's the work? What is he talking about when he says the work?
The transformation.
The work, the ground, and eros. The transform. Okay. All
I
right.
think it's the next sentence there. It is the work of creation, then it is poetry a making.
Mhm.
And he's
But it goes on. It is also the opus alchemicum of Hermetic and Rosicrucian identity.
Yeah.
The rhymes of this poem. I mean, he goes on to talk about the work not just as poetry, but poetry. You're right, poetry. But poetry becomes something more than poems in Duncan's thinking. Poetry becomes the image of, well, that's what we have to decide. That's what we have to decide as we read this chapter. But what got me was the work itself is the transformation of the ground. The transformation of the ground. What does he mean by ground?
The formlessness into something formed, isn't it? Making
Well,
something out of nothing, or
yeah, you can, that's certainly part of it.
It's
Well, it's
Sorry?
also like the dirt and the seed in the dirt.
Yep. Yep. I'll go with that.
is it in this
I
chapter?
also think
that
it's
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
and the cultivation. There's a husbandry implied here.
Yes. It also struck me that the ground is where you find yourself when the work presents itself to you. It's the ground is all the world that you have inherited and stand on without even knowing what it is, what the composition of your own soul is at that point. It's the ground that it's the ground of our lives, the culture, the beliefs, the systems of thinking, the attitudes, the stance that you begin with is the ground. Also, I mean, also the ground. It's all these things. I mean, it's like with Duncan, it's always, multiple, rich, and um,
So when he says later on here that we will come close to depth psychology,
yeah,
that in a way is implicit in what you just said, Michael, because it is all of those things, the history, the culture, etc. It's also the self.
that is this. I mean, that is the self, isn't it, Julia? I mean, that's when
Yeah.
you come to yourself for the first time. That's what you come to understand and see. The work itself is the transformation of the ground. Now, remember last time I said this is a book. This book is about a poet searching for poetics. He's in a transformational ordeal
Uh-huh.
to arrive at what? To arrive at a stance That's what Olson calls it, to arrive at a way literally of being in the world that's other than the ground that he begins with. So poetics, this is like so important, you know. Poetics, you don't just get a poetics, you know. You don't just come up with a theory, or you don't just read a book and go, oh, that's my poetics now. This is about a, a, a spiritual ordeal that has to do with the transformation of the ground. And transformation is like, I mean, we're talking ontological here, right? Like real change, somatic, spiritual, intellectual, any dimension of the human you can add to that, changing in response to the work. The work itself is the transformation of the ground. The work itself is the transformation of the ground. To take up that work is to transform the ground.
Yeah, I think it's also for me what really stands out. It's not just about one self, the individual ego, the creator individual self, but it's transforming the entire cultural ground, the vast matrix from which we all come culturally, that each of us working it changes the whole scene, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is. It's like a profoundly, as I said, the creation, the creative act, and the relevance of the poet to all of it.
Yeah.
And it changes as we go. We shift it as in some kind of odd set of feedback loops.
Right. If we think about this chapter as a facet of the work, I mean, you have to, right? I mean, that's what he's undertaking here. This is the work. So what is the work in this chapter? Do you want me to tell you? I don't know. Hey, I'm just making this up, you know. It looks to me like it's the systematic excavation of the the sources of our ground, and the way in which those sources have been shaped, manipulated, shaped, whatever, into the ground that we know, but by implication also revealing what was excluded. And in the process of finding that out, something happens to Duncan. Did you guys get the lines I sent from the poem?
Yeah.
I just love those two stanzas are just incredible. And in a way, I mean, I think you could argue that the whole, let me see if I can, oh, here it is. Can I read it?
Sure.
But the
Yeah.
eyes,
And which book that is from?
oh, I don't know. I got it at the Poetry Foundation.
No, it's in
It's
Opening
in
of the field, right?
opening
it's
of
in
the
Opening of the
field.
Field, yeah. In Goya's canvas, Cupid and Psyche have a hurt, voluptuous grace, bruised by redemption. The copper light falling upon the brown boy's slight body is carnal fate that sends the soul wailing up from blind innocence, ensnared by dimness into the deprivations of desiring sight. But the eyes in Goya's painting are soft, diffuse with rapture, absorb the flame. Their bodies yield out of strength. Waves of visual pleasure wrap them in a sorrow previous to their impatience. A bronze of yearning arose that burns the tips of their bodies, lips, ends of fingers, nipples. He is not winged. His thighs are flesh, are clouds lit by the sun in its going down, hot luminescence at the loins of the visible. I would be happy if those were the last words I heard before I died. Hot luminescence at the loins of the visible. I mean, there's it's a remarkable fusion of the sun in its going down, hot luminescence at the loins of the visible. It's a vision of creation that is fundamentally erotic, that the world has never been the same for me after I read this poem, because every time I see that in the sky now, where you see the cloud and the sun behind it and the hot luminescence at the edge of the cloud, which he calls the loins of the visible, which first of all makes it sexual. I mean, it's like orgasmic, but it's also a fusion of light and matter, of loins and light. It's a vision of a world that is, well, what Olson talked about that America had invented a world in which the secular loses nothing of the divine. The secular loses nothing of the divine. So again, it's that I don't think Duncan would have said it quite that way, but hot luminescence at the loins of the visible is an image that brings together those themes, in the sense that you have matter, you have spirit, you have light, all kind of fused into the world that we're in, but a world that is endowed with a kind of luminescence that's just divine. What else can you say? You have to admit, those lines are amazing. I don't see a lot of people nodding their heads and saying, that's true.
No. And the sun going down is an image that Duncan returns to.
Yeah.
I have a poster on my wall of a print that was made of one of his poems that Duncan decorated, painted, that I'll copy for next week and send to us. Quand le soleil foyer descend dans les eaux, when the sun's foyer, the sun's whatever path, descends into the water.
Yeah. It's in the poem we read last time too, the one with the queen under the hill.
The opening of the field.
The opening of the field.
Yeah.
The sun going down. It was part of a dream that he had that informed his imagination in a profound way. And it keeps coming back and back in the poems. But I want to, so to go back to what I was saying, that this is where he lays out what he's going to do, the trip that we're on. We're on a trip with him right now. And the trip involves this work, this work, this work. And the work begins with Eros. And what the work does is, well, we can trash Bakersfield again, right? In Bakersfield in 1940, whenever it was, I'm sure Bakersfield's very enlightened today. But at the time, it wasn't so enlightened. It was like a cross section of the United States of America with its absolute, almost psychotic dualistic relationship to Eros. On the one hand, judging, repressing, punishing sexuality. And on the other hand, it's like Jekyll and Hyde, right? On the other hand, this whole other world of underground pornography and the degraded Eros. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not against pornography necessarily, but it's not like in the scheme of in looking at the way in which Americans have traditionally dealt with questions of Eros, it's censor and repress and secretly indulge.
Exploit.
Mike, did you want to say something? Or Niels? Sorry, I thought you had your hand up.
No, sorry. I was actually saying that's incredibly right. And so I may follow up with that in terms of thinking through the idea of what that means in terms of an emergence of poetic activity that I think Duncan is thinking through, and that I think Olson is also thinking through in different ways. And I think Duncan tries to articulate this in a very careful way, in a very, very, I think, sweet way, which is different from much of U.S. America understanding of eroticism. That's all I want to say.
Yeah. No, I think that's right on. And Duncan was especially acutely aware of it being gay in Bakersfield, but at that point, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered where. I mean, he might have disappeared in New York or somewhere, but Bakersfield was something else. And anyway, it was the basis of the impetus behind this deep dive into the history of Eros as a power in our lives, probably the dominant power in our lives, which is why it's right here at the beginning of his exploration. I mean, I can't think of another power that is as ubiquitously present in just about everything we do in one way or another. The way how we decide things, that something is more, slightly more pleasant, say, but that if you look at that pleasantness, there's always a kind of erotic undertone. It's not about sex. It's not about any sort of narrow definition. It's a primal defining power in the human psyche. And because of that, because it's so powerful, it's always front and center in terms of people trying to control it. Duncan takes us from that primal, what he calls primal eros, which I'm thinking of as animal eros, pre-human eros. Eros there's nothing symbolic about it. It's just the power in life. To the emergence of eros as a symbolic presence. And then the way that transforms is manipulated and fought over and legislated and punished from the Greeks right up to his moment. And in the process of tracing that history, he relates it to the way in which it becomes a defining energy of poetry as he knows it. Not just as topic, but as an actual relationship to language. I think that's what I like so much about that line, hot luminescence at the loins of the visible. It's what it says, but it does it. It does it, It really does it. It does it for me anyway. But I'm a pushover for that stuff. But he does it. And language, as a poet, language is your material. And the question is, what is that relationship that you establish with it, with language?
And so, Mike, sorry if I can intervene.
No, do please.
So I want to ask everyone. So I think one of the great things about that chapter about Eros and thinking through what it means to sort of fall in love with poetry and how we can actually think through poetry as love or heartbreak or whatever, is to understand that moment. And I think Duncan does such a great job of establishing that, right? And establishing that space where where uh, where he fell in love with poetry, right? And and I would just like to hear from others about what Eros means in terms of poetry and their relationship to Duncan. And for me, it means really it's a seductive relationship, but it's also a falling apart. Like you're not just seduced. There's a break. There's something that happens, and I think that's what he's trying to point to.
What do you mean
And
by break?
so if we think of like what the idea of falling in love is, right? So even the metaphor of falling in love, there's a moment where something happens, and I think that's what Duncan is trying to point to within this book, right? So there's an idea of he encountered HD through his teacher, and he fell in love. And that was what I mean by a break is something has to happen where there is a moment before and a moment afterwards that one is involved in the question of poetry as such.
Okay. I wouldn't argue with that. Why do you think?
I was gonna jump in maybe
Sure,
that
Kath.
to that invitation. I don't know. It's like a thing that's like hard to put briefly, but I'm gonna try. I think like what's resonating with what you said, Niels, is like something that I've been reflecting on lately, which is like looking back at like the reasons I got into poetry, which had to do with I don't know, like a certain fascination with language, a certain fascination with like old literature, which tends to be poetic, but then um what's been interesting looking back has been seeing that following that like sort of fascination with certain things has like led me towards a destination that like didn't wasn't visible from the beginning. There's like this larger thing that's happening that that I as a subject can't like hold on to some image of what that is or who I'm going to be at the end of that. But like actually I think that what I hear in that breaking apart is like that forfeiting of any knowledge of where that's going to go and like letting whoever I am in the moment kind of like give way to who I'll be as I continue to honor this weird call to poetry that has probably brought many of us to this room today.
The ground changes, right?
It does.
Hmm.
There,
Let's look at, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of elements of what you said made me think of the myth itself, the story itself of Cupid and Psyche. Um, and Duncan places such emphasis on that particular story. It might pay us to take a look at that.
I just want to say one thing, Michael, that the latest podcast that I've done on the Cascadian Prophets podcast series is with Stephen Torr, 84-year-old poet, lives part-time in Atlin, BC, which is 2 hours south of Whitehorse, and on Salt Spring Island. And his theory is that poetry is the ecstatic surplus.
Yeah.
There's so much going through your life that you have to communicate this or attempt to discover it for yourself or understand in your own words what it might be. And then it's an ecstatic surplus. So its connection to Eros would seem clear with that kind of terminology.
Yes, I think that's certainly relevant.
I'm happy to bring up the passage of Eros if you tell me what page would be best and we can have it on the screen.
I'm so of the
I'm sorry, the Psyche, the Cupid and Psyche myth.
well, he goes on for a long way. So let me just
Yeah.
summarize. Um, the story begins when Psyche, who is a daughter of a well-to-do family, is Eros falls in love with her. And arranges with her family that she come live in Eros's castle, and where she can have whatever she wants, except she can't look at him. She can't see him. So Duncan's interpretation of that is that its relevance to us as writers is that we begin with a kind of blindness
Yes.
to who we are and what we're doing.
Yep.
And a kind of assumption that, hey, this is it, everything's good, right? But what happens with Psyche? Well, in the story, there's a lot of narrative elements that her sisters come and they're very jealous and they keep trying to provoke her to take a look, and they tell her, you must be a monster. he comes in the night when she's asleep, and she decides finally that she will see him, which is, I mean, in one sense, it's a big mistake, but in another, I mean, in Duncan's reading of the story, the myth, it's like the fortunate fall, because at that point she loses everything by attempting to see, to look where she shouldn't look, where she's been told not to look, to actually look into the face of Eros. And she burns him with a candle, as I recall. He's sleeping. She comes, there's a famous engraving of this, and she comes and to see him in the night with a candle, and a drop of wax falls on him and wakes him, and he's gone. Aphrodite takes him up to wherever they go, and she is condemned to wander the earth without him. Now, that's in Duncan's reading a state of preparation for learning, or or for it's a preparation for the work that will transform the ground. So, I mean, the story goes on. It's a marvelous story. It's very rich and full of these wonderful images. At one point, Aphrodite, I can't remember why, but Aphrodite is persuaded to allow Psyche to try to redeem herself. But she has to pass a number of tasks. And one of the tasks is Aphrodite dumps a huge pile of mixed seeds, like sesame seeds and millet seeds, and in front of her and says, sort them out. And Psyche is in despair because she knows that she can't possibly do that. And some ants take mercy on her. And now this is like a kind of crucial point where the abandonment of hope, the abandonment of your sense of your ability to control things, to actually face this pile of seeds that you'll never, ever be able to do it. And that you will lose love forever because of that. To reach that point is when something else kicks in. That's the point where something else kicks in. The ants come. The ants are non-human. They're from another place, but they show up all of a sudden and they separate out all the seeds. Thousands of ants come and they. So as a psychological, as a story of Psyche's growth, it's a story about the abandonment of the human arrogance about its place in the world. Because you can't be a poet if you are, I mean, you can write poetry, but you can't, I mean, lots of people do, I should say. But you can't be a poet of the order that Duncan is writing about if you think you can control what's happening. Eros, it's so central to everything. It's the energy that informs all of our relationships. Everything. It's not just about, a hot date or sex or whatever. It's the Hillman has a really beautiful little book on anima. I don't know if you've ever seen it or read it, where he it's basically, and when he talks about anima, he's basically talking about eros in the sense that Duncan is, as a fundamental informing energy of all of our relationships to each other and to the world. Eros is what connects us. It's creative.
Mike, I love that. I wonder if you can say more about the connection to death with
To,
Eros and what that means
to
in
death.
terms of the way as poets we can't be poets without also connecting to the idea of our desire coming to an end or our desire sort of being eaten by bugs.
Well, I don't know what to say to that, Niels. I really don't. I mean, hey, I'm going to be 80 years old next year, so death is like a a companion in a sense, sort of hanging around the house.
Michael,
Like,
two people have their hands up, Jay and then Julia.
okay. Uh, Jay,
Um, so just uh, reflecting on what you just said there about anima and eros. Anima, as I recall, is the Latin word for psyche.
yeah.
Um, so it doesn't seem quite right to say that anima and eros are the same thing. Um,
I,
and this is what I was, when you were asking a question earlier that I wanted to reflect on a couple sentences after the beginning. He says, we are tracing the path of Psyche and her Eros. So there's kind of this implication of possession there as workers of a fiction in the art of poetry. And I'm not sure if I'm making a good point here, but the relationship between Psyche and Eros almost seems like it transforms a little bit over the course of the chapter. But I'm curious what other people think of that, if anything.
let me just clarify the thing about Hillman. When he's talking about anima, like the traditional Jungian notion of anima is that it's the feminine principle as opposed to animus, which is the masculine principle. Um, he kind of blows that out of and that anima is something that belongs to men, and animus is something that belongs to women. He kind of blows that out of the water and says that no, anima is everybody's fundamental connecting energy. It's the energy, you can call it feminine, and it is, um, but it's in everyone. It's not just in men, it's in women. And it has to do with how we connect uh, to other people and to the world. That's what, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, what Hillman says. So when I make the connection to Eros, it's not mythological in that sense. It's more uh I'm s- I'm feeling that the connective energy of anima is similar to the connective energy of eros. Um I don't think they're the same thing. And I think that Hillman does go into that because there is a deep erotic, there's always an erotic dimension when you are connecting, when you're making, when you're touching, when you're in touch. And that's my two-bit psychological contribution. I'm sorry. So somebody else.
Julia had a comment,
Julia.
and then Aaron had something in the chat that could be worth discussing. Julia, if you could unmute and
Julia,
she's
unmute.
she's
Unmute.
Oh, that was
There you go.
This goes back to where we were a few minutes ago, what Niels was saying about death and what Michael was saying about the ultimate loss. When the wax angers Eros, and she is bereft by her impatience to see him or curiosity, I'm not quite sure, but something like that. And then she is in this state of loss. And Duncan equates that to, in a way, the starting ground for finding one's way into this ordeal of poetry.
Yeah.
Well, in class, he often spoke about the office of poetry as opposed to the career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how an office is something you serve. You don't run it. You can't manipulate it. You don't need a manager, etc. It's something you aspire to serve. And I think that has to do with the seeds, so to speak, that he's trying to separate here.
Yeah.
Between the common sense of poetry as a commodity as we know it, and this other more elusive, more egoless in a certain way path. That's all.
he makes a comparison by using the phrase mythopoetic to make that distinction, I think in chapter 2. We have a comment from Aaron. Aaron, do you want to just say it out loud, what you have there in the chat? And
Actually, I was interested in Neil's question about death because I'm not sure if death is like is the end of things. That feels like it's back into a really plot driven or narrative driven where there's a beginning and you go in a linear way and it ends with death. I feel like in this death is like Psyche going through Hades. It's like Persephone going into Hades. It's like any kind of underground thing where you're losing who you are and what you know and going into complete ignorance. I feel like this chapter is about that, about the humbling, and also your earlier point, Neil, is that complete breakdown and humbling when you give yourself over to be changed by something you don't understand and can't fully see. I think that's a kind of death. Yeah, so I just want to throw that out there. I kind of ignored. I don't even remember what I put in the Yeah. I'm more interested in death than alliance, I guess. Yeah.
Then what?
Than my comment in the chat.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, death is, yeah. I can't even begin. Like, yes, that's true. I mean, what you say is true, Aaron. I mean, that there's, I don't want to say exactly figurative deaths. I mean, there are deaths where you lose yourself and you're gone. But then there's the other one, the big one, and that's real, you know. And it's, you know what? It is what it's just there. It is what it is. It's in a sense, it's like Eros that way. I mean, Eros is just there. It's in your life. It determines so much of what happens to you or what you end up doing in your life. And death is just always there, you know, always there, sitting on your shoulder. Could happen any minute, you know, you just never know. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's the end because you're right. I don't think that life is a narrative like with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's an event, and these are extraordinary moments in that event. The moment of being born and the moment of being unborn, or whatever, however you want to look at it. I the I'm not sure what the connection to Eros is that you were pointing to, Niels. The in terms of the relationship between Eros and death. I mean, that's very Freudian, right? Like the
Right. So
Thanatos.
just to clarify to everyone, my name is Boyd, right? So I'm whatever's going on with Zoom. So my name is Boyd. But yeah, so
Oh,
what
Boyd.
I
So why were you Niels? Jesus.
I well, I whatever,
Sorry.
That's
whatever.
that's what
There,
your name said.
in
So I
the
rechanged. I changed it to Boyd. So
Yeah.
that you
so
know.
there we are. So yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure what I was thinking of, except for the fact that like
Oh,
um
God.
uh I've been reading through Duncan and I've been reading through Olson and there really is a question for me like with the Maximus poems and sort of what's taking place uh, in the Maximus poems from 4, 5, and 6, and the way in which Olson wants to think about a relationship to history that kind of leads to death and kind of is, you know, going through the question of okay, this idea of of desire might lead to something that has an end, and yet at the same time he refuses that and tries to think through something which is deeper and something which is contained in time. And I was thinking about this in relationship to Duncan because this book is really about a kind of seduction of poetry and what it means to be seduced by poetry. And that is a reflection on something which happened earlier. And by definition, that means you're older, right? So this didn't happen yesterday, it happened a long time ago. So there, to me, it seems like there's a relationship between eros and death by definition, because you don't just get seduced all at once. You get seduced over time, right? And so there is an idea of like, if we love poetry, well, poetry might have come before us and it might be around after us. So what does
Oh, yeah.
that mean?
But there's also, there's is it French? There's some expression that refers to orgasm as a little death.
Petite mort.
Yeah, petit mort. Because in that moment you lose yourself, you're gone. You're not there anymore. I mean, that's how I read it. Like and I guess in that sense, if you're going to look at death as the absence of self or the disappearance of self, then yeah, Eros is intimately connected because that's one of the determining aspects of Eros in terms of the passionate relationships is to lose yourself in the relationship. You were talking about falling in love, like the falling part, the you really fall. You fall. And when you're falling, you're not in control. You're gone, you know? Um, so yeah, I mean somebody saying something, Paul?
Yeah, it's my wife in the back room. But I
Oh.
did want to, I had my mic open because I wanted to point out what I see as a similarity. You said petite mort, and that thought had crossed my mind as this conversation is going on. But also in the losing of oneself in the separation of those seeds, how it's not a task that can be done by your will and in the amount of time that was required. So what has to be done there is a losing of oneself, some kind of surrender. And I think that's there's a similarity between those two things.
He talks about the unconscious later in the chapter. All right. He's got that.
He
Because
says
I mean, as a writer, I don't know. You must have had the experience, right? I write books. So I'll set myself a book project and I'll even come up with all the titles of the poems that are going to go in the book. And then I'll write the poems to the titles. And then when I finish, I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm never going to write another book. I can't think of what I'm going to write. What am I going to write next? Like, oh my God, And then you learn to just give it a break and let the old unk do its work. That's what HD called it, the unk. Let it do its work and it'll come. It just comes, it comes. Doesn't come from you. It comes from like this deep, deep place that's not you, but that's working. There's that word, work.
Yeah,
That's
and
that's
in
what,
this chapter, Duncan says, in becoming lovers, we become something other than ourselves, subjects of a demonic force previous to our humanity.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he didn't really talk too much or write too much about the hermetic and alchemical imagery, although he mentions it in this chapter. But it's that imagery is all about the fusion of individual identities into, well, first of all, they die and decompose and turn into shit. And then out of that comes a new being. But you have to lose yourself before you can enter into that marriage. And that's the imagery that haunts all this Eros stuff that he writes about here, is that notion of of a of a heros gamos, a sacred marriage. The like the stuff about the Grail with the with he kind of underplays it, but he talks about the lance bleeding into the cup, right? That imagery. Um, and he talks about romance and the effect of that on our whole understanding of Eros and what it is. I just found the thing about well, there was this, the cult of the gods. I don't know. Are you guys all comfortable with this conversation about gods? I mean, they're around. The cult of the gods, as it is found in the Hellenizing poems of D.H. Lawrence, H.D., and Pound in the Imagist period, cannot be separated from the reawakened sense of the meaning and the reality of gods as facts of human experience that we find in contemporary studies of the mystery cults. And he goes on and cites a number of books. But it's that notion that gods are facts in human life. And HD, I just have this image of her in the British Museum, and she's got these Greek poems, and she's translating them and realizing as she's translating them, first of all, the living presence of the figures in the poems, that there's a way in which those poems continue to activate the gods. And the fact that the sparseness, the simplicity of that Greek verse is in fact the model of her own contemporary work. It's really interesting in the poems that were published in Chicago, Poetry Chicago, and I think it was like 1913. There are, I don't know, 7 poems or 6 or 7 poems, and 4 of them are translations, and 2 of them are signed HD Imagiste. But you can't tell the difference between the translation and the poems that she wrote herself. She has so grasped the essential energy of that hard-edged simplicity. I don't know what other word there is, right? It's like she gets rid of all the crap. And I mean, Duncan calls it Hellenizing. Yeah, I guess it's Hellenizing. And but what strikes me is the way that it determines, she literally determines the future of poetry at that point. She changes how poems are written. I mean, Pound wanted to do that, but he never could. But he could find the people who did. I mean, nobody writes like Pound, right? They don't. Who writes like Pound? People still write like HD. No, I do sometimes. Um, so I find that remarkable. And it has to do, I don't know. I was going to say it has to do with Eros. I don't know how I would follow through on that. But the gods are here, however you want to think about it. And they are other than us. And they have their way with us. the poetry part of it is absolutely important because you can know all this stuff. This is what Duncan says. That one image may recall another, finding depth in the resounding is the secret of rhyme and measure. Rhyme and measure. And they're together, rhyme and measure are like that, right? Like they're totally together, which is interesting if you think about it, because if rhyme and measure are two aspects of the same thing, then how you deal with rhyme has to do with how you measure, what your measure is. The time of a poem is felt as a recognition of return in vowel tone and in consonant formations, of pattern in the sequence of syllables, in stress and in pitch of a melody, of image and meanings. The time of a poem is in, I mean, that's your toolbox. And Duncan was so fabulous with it.
Excuse me, Michael, what page are you on?
Oh, I was on at the very end on 99. It's the last paragraph. I just think this gets forgotten. Like I don't know if they teach it anymore. I mean, there was a whole time in the 80s and the 90s where like so-called poetry had no music. Like there was no attention to vowel tone and consonant formations and sequence of syllables. And that is what determines a poem, a poem. Like a poet, there's lots of people who write poetry, and God bless them all. I think the more people who write poetry, the better, you know? But there are also some, in that whole array of people who write poetry, there are some people who um, have an ear for what Duncan is talking about. And that determines them as poets of another order. I mean, there's poetry. What can you say? I mean, like there's a lot of poetry around that's, you know, it's like a hobby, and it's really good that people do that. Then there are people who are engaged in this conversation that goes back to Hesiod and before. Poets who are engaged in that conversation, as opposed to writing about what happened to them today or who they fell in love with or whatever. People who are engaged in that conversation open up the opportunity of poetry to whole other dimensions of experience beyond what we think of as the limits of the day. I can't find it. I'm just looking for this. He says,
Give me a key word, Michael, and I can help you find it.
well, I'm sorry, I can't, Paul. I wish I could. He was talking about what the poem does.
Is it around the place where he talks about Gaudia Breshki or?
Maybe. Oh, here it is. No, that's not it.
Well, for me, the final sentence of that paragraph you were reading there, the impulse of dreams or poems is to provide a ground. Again, it brings us back, bookends the whole chapter,
Yes.
bringing back to a ground for some form beyond what we know, for feeling greater than reality.
Yeah. That maybe that was it. Does that make sense to you?
Makes sense to me. I make some sense of it. I don't know. But there's that sense of like going beyond what we know. So I think the poetry that you're referring to, the daily accounting, the trauma poems and such, that's what we know. We know that already. But
Yes.
let's move along.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I mean, there's nothing, I mean, that's fine. That's some people, that's what they want to do. They want to write about that, and
No problem. No problem.
it satisfies them, and that's fine. Um, but then there's this whole other possibility. That's all. I mean, there was, oh yeah, is this where he says, he quotes Pound. I love this actually. He quotes Pound, writing about the troubadours. This is on page 91. He says the poetry of Provence was divided into an orthodox language of single meanings and an heretical language where meanings were united in a spiritual double entendre. We find this poetry divided into two schools, Pound wrote. The first school complained about the obscurities of the second. We have them always with us. They claimed, or rather jeered in Provence, remonstrated in Tuscany, wrangled today and will wrangle tomorrow, and not without some show of reason, that poetry, especially lyric poetry, must be simple, that you must get the meaning while the man sings it. Where there are, some objected, a willful obscurity, there was for others a matrix of meanings. I just like this passage so much because 100 years on, it's exactly the same situation, right? This is a description of the current. It's probably worse today than it was in Pound's time because now there's creative writing, and there was no creative writing in 1922 or whenever Pound wrote this.
I'm sorry, you can't be the poet laureate of Chimicum because you have to get the meaning the first time we hear it.
You have to get the meaning the first time you hear it. I would tell my students, um, yes, absolutely. I tell my students, when I had students back in the day, take a poem, any poem, because they're all like, they encounter this difficulty or obscure, what they experience as obscurity, and they blame the poem rather than understanding that they've just hit a limit. They've hit their own limit. And I would tell them, take a poem, put it on your bedside table, and read it every night for a month, the same poem. Just read the same poem. It's like a whole different relationship to reading than what we normally think of as reading, which is start at the beginning, you get to the end. Put that novel down, talk about it at the book club, whatever. Get the next novel. Read that beginning to end. So with that kind of mentality or mindset, then you can't read poetry because poetry doesn't want to be read that way. It wants you to stop and read it and then read it over again, read it over again. and again, and every time you read it, then the language yields a little bit more and a little bit more, and you start to hear things and see things. But it's an experience of reading that is unknown. It's like unknown. Well, I guess all reading is now unknown, isn't it? If it's not on a screen.
But that's partly because we teach people to read for message
Yes.
and meaning, and that's it. They're and it's not just poetry. They can't read other things either. You can't read Nabokov's uh, memoir.
No, you can't read. Yeah.
It would drive you crazy.
You can't read Diane Williams. You can't read Carol Masso. You know, you if you want instant satisfaction, like some kind of resolution of comprehension into a fixed moment of understanding, you can't read those people. It's
Google Ads, Google AI.
who was that? That was yes. Anyway, I liked that.
Michael, he speaks more about that on 97, where he's also quoting Pound about the consciousness of those poets in the middle of the page.
Yeah. It's germinal. Of certain men, Pound wrote, their consciousness is germinal. Theosophic insights lie back of Pound's study. Freudian, which study are we talking about here? Oh, The Spirit of Romance. If you guys get a chance to read The Spirit of Romance, you should do it. It's actually a delightful book. It's really interesting. I mean, Duncan says somewhere in here that it's probably most of it's not factual, but Pound puts together a great story about poetry. Theosophic insights lie back of Pound's study. Freudian learning informs HDs. Theosophic is behind Pound, Freudian's behind HD. But these poets bring us to see the theosophic and the psychoanalytic anew as hints of a primary poetic vision. That's just so key, you know? It's so easy to get lost in the vocabulary and the ideational structure of psychology, for instance, and think that's the poem, and it's not. It's psychology. Now, which is not to say that there's not the experience of truths to be had in psychology, because there obviously are many such, but they are like what HD does, as he points out here, is she transforms them, or she allows them to open beyond themselves. She finds a way to get out of the way. So she's not citing, Freud's theories. She allows Freud's theories to open up in her mind and imagination and breed a different language, a language that has I don't know how to, it's a language that I want to say implications, but it has overtones and undertones and implications that are not part of psychology. It's so easy, like, to get sucked up into somebody else's vocabulary. And I guess that's part of what this work is that we are embarked on here, the work that Duncan's talking about, which is to transform the ground so that what speaks or what is spoken is unanticipated. Yeah, matrix of meanings. I mean, psychology can open into that, but it's very specific. Um, do you know what I'm talking about? Like it's a
Duncan seemed to suggesting that HD contributes to psychoanalysis, and as opposed to the backwards
right.
psychoanalysis,
Yeah,
unfold to
yeah,
provide some sort of explanatory model to
yeah.
what's going on in HD. HD makes psychoanalysis make sense
Yeah. Well,
rather than the backwards, the other way around or something. You see psychoanalysis anew thanks to HD, not we see HD anew thanks to Freud.
yeah, that's well put, Mike. Thanks.
Was also, if I can jump in, Michael, too.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a article that an Orthodox theologian, David Bentley Hart, wrote about Jung and Gnosticism, and specifically like calling out Jung for the way that he um like that he like encounters this God and like is like, oh, like you're part of like my psyche, and he like and there's like some sort of struggle or whatever, but he like resolves it by shrinking the God down and putting him in his pocket. And Hart, and like for Jung, it's like this integrative sort of like great outcome, but like Hart is like, that's horrible. Like you've like shrunken the divine down into this smaller thing that you can manage, but is that really? And I mean, in the way, and what I hear you saying is kind of the way that by using the system in a totalizing way in that, and to totally interiorize and internalize it all is to sort of rob it of its expansive and
Yeah,
opening possibilities.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we don't want to diss Young because Young was he can I mean he contributed a lot. He opened up a lot of ways of thinking that were necessary. And but absolutely, he had limits. I mean, one of the joys of reading Hillman is that he calls out Jung. He'll say, this is he fucked up here. And Hillman has a way of doing it's almost like poetry, like reading him is like almost like poetry because he he just keeps opening and opening and opening. And when you think you've reached a conclusive point or you think now, oh, I get it now, he blows it up and says, no, it's this, it's beyond that, it's more. He keeps going and going. Um, and it's just like it's so wonderful. It's just like well, I heard Duncan speak a few times. And in a way, it's like Duncan. Like Duncan, somebody, oh, it was Victor, told me he once met Duncan at the airport, and Duncan came off the plane and he was talking. And he was talking and he was talking. He talked all the way to where they stayed. He talked until he went to bed. He got up in the morning, he was talking. They went to the church to give the sermon, and he's still talking. And that this sermon, he just goes right into the sermon, and he's still talking and talking. And that was Duncan. He was like, it just poured out. It poured out of him. Um, yeah, that's the that's a beautiful thing. I think Olson was a bit like that too. You know, he would just talk and talk and talk. And who was it? Jack told me a story once about Corso, and it wasn't Corso, it was somebody else that interrupted Olson in a class and said, I want to say something. And Olson said, okay. And then this person couldn't think of anything to say really that was going to contribute. And then Olson just started up again. It was like this. They had, I mean, they were very close, those two, right? Um, Duncan and Olson. I mean, they had their disagreements, but they were wonderful, friendly disagreements about what's wisdom, you know, and Olson wrote that famous essay against wisdom as such, criticizing Duncan, and Duncan didn't get upset. He just came back and answered Charles, and it was a it was a relationship that was fruitful, um, where they respected each other deeply, deeply enough that they could honestly say, "Hey, I'm against wisdom as such, and that sounds like what you're doing." You know, they could be honest with each other, which is a absolutely wonderful and rare thing. To transform the ground. Coming out of this, Duncan has led us through a an ordeal of Eros. We have witnessed Eros being chained and mutilated and, you know, transformed and reformed, and but it never goes away, I think is the point. It never ever goes away. The church can try to control it with marriage or whatever. But you know, it's like good luck with that. Like it's it's not gonna win. You're never gonna win. At worst, you're going to actually turn it into something ugly. Like that energy will become dark and sadistic. But you're never going to control it, ever. I mean, all those monks, you got to be kidding me. You know, they were like stooping the nuns and the... it was not a chaste scene by a long shot. But because of the, I guess, fear of of the of the power of Eros, this extraordinary it's extraordinary. It really is. I mean, if you do a little deep diving into your own unconscious, it's it's pretty amazing the power that that energy has, especially when it's like frustrated, or you know, and you end up feeling abandoned, like someone's not accepting your love, like you need that love and it's not coming, or and then it turns into this horrible pain of loss and grief. It's everywhere. That's all I have to say about it. It's everywhere.
So, Mike, I want to think about that because my understanding of poetry is built around a question of history and built around a question of the way in which poetic desire is expressed in history. And what I'm loving about this conversation is it's more internal. And there's a question of psychology, and there's a way in which uh, the idea of image isn't just the question of a temporal image, but also an image that links to some sort of psychological uh, uh, in image, as it were. And I'm wondering if you can say more about how, because you were talking about last time how modernism emerged out of a temporal space, how this is a question of of modernist concerns, right? Because we are living in a postmodern era, as it were. And I'm wondering, this is a large question, and so you don't have to answer it as such. But
Well, the bigger
I'm
the better,
wondering,
Mike. Bring it on.
yes, yes. So, well, maybe I'll stop there. Maybe I'll
Well, what
stop
was the
there.
question exactly?
So the question is, thinking through the idea of what it means to have a investment in, let's say, the image itself, and the idea, and you and I have sort of back-challenged on this, but like the idea of like the image having a depth. How
Yes.
does that relate to the question of time and the question of modernism and the question of where we are right now in the 21st century?
I don't know. I'm thinking as you're talking, I was thinking about this before too, because you brought up Maximus 456. I know this is off, not part of our reading, but um, Maximus 456, well, after the initial opening on the porch where he spins into the snow dancing, it opens up with the story of Mary, and it's a myth. Uh, and the story of Mary is this handsome sailor in Gloucester would go out and fight this bull. And he got quite the reputation as a bullfighter. And one day he went out early, and when people came out later, they found pieces of him like scattered around the corral or wherever it was that the bull was, right? Now, there's an image, and it's an image that, for me, immediately evokes a whole tradition of other images where, like Mithraic images and various other Near Eastern religions, where the bull is slaughtered by man, and in order to create fecundity, to nourish the earth with the blood of the bull. And Olson takes that image, and blows it apart by having the bull kill Mary. I mean, he did kill Mary. He didn't have him do that, but that was the story, which is a story about a different time, a different temporal space where the human is no longer in control of that deep and primitive animal power of the bull. The bull gets the guy. The guy doesn't get the bull. And that's a temporal, that's experiencing that is to locate you in a different time zone. Um, I think that book is all about time and the relationship of time and history. Creeley once said that the Maximus poems were poems about historical geography. And I mean, I just find yeah, okay. If we understand history as a great mystery, that we don't understand what time is or what history is or where it goes and whatever, and that geography is sacred geography, then yeah, okay, it's historical geography, but it's it's constantly doing what Duncan talks about, which is transforming the ground of our thinking, transforming the ground of our thinking so that we have to come into a new relation to the world, to the depth of the world. You know, I know you and I talked about this before, but it has to do with the fact that modernity is planar. You know, reality is a plane in modernity. It has no above and no below. It's a singular plane. A depth when a poet like Robin used to talk about that, about the depth of the world. I think he got that from phenomenology, from Husserl or Merleau-Ponty. He read a lot of Merleau-Ponty. Um, but the depth of the world is to experience a world that has actual meaning as part of its substance. The experience of meaning is part of the substance of the world. That's how I take it. Um, it's not meaning as, oh, here's the meaning. You want to know the meaning? It's meaning as an experience of sense, I guess, of that there's sense. And that if there's sense, sense is the ground of meaning in that way. Um, so that's depth, I think. My friend here at the down the road is an artist who does ecological art. He calls it ecological art. And he built this thing last summer in a field in Kingston. It's like a pyramid that he made out of straw and hay. Um, it's beautiful. There's some aerial shots of it, and it's like this massive. I call them compostable monuments. They're monumental, but they're not permanent. They're like compostable monuments. So you have the awesome sense of that a monument gives you about the world, that there's a scale beyond us and something that's, you know, makes us understand that there's bigger stuff than us. But then what he does is he's got this pyramid and then there's an opening into it. And when you walk into it, all you can see is the sky and the earth. Now that's an experience of depth. That's what he's after in that sculpture, is an experience of depth that escapes the law of the plane, where you're just always looking out straight ahead, and not looking up and not looking down.
Like James Turrell's works, um, the Light Rain exhibit in Seattle, where it has a retractable roof and the artwork is the sky. He comes from the Quaker tradition, and so his his big project, Rodin's Crater, is related to that as well. Watching the sky.
Uh-huh.
There was something that Boyd said that was a passage that I thought was really critical. It wasn't from chapter 3, Eros, but it was from the previous chapter. I have it queued up on the screen share, so I'm gonna pull it up. I'd like it if we could read that, and maybe Boyd, this goes somewhat to what you were bringing up just a moment ago. And it starts with that paragraph, Michael, if the definition of the image in the talk of Pound
Do you want
HD.
me to read that, or Boyd, do you want
I
to
would,
read it?
Michael, go ahead. Why don't you read it?
The definition of the image in the talk of Pound HD in Aldington in the tea room of the British Museum in 1912 had led to the declaration of a literary movement, and it gave an advertising label to the work of new poems appearing in The Egoist, where Richard Aldington had become an editor in 1913, and in the United States in Poetry, Poetry Chicago, where Harriet Monroe might be responsive, it was hoped, to Pound's advice. She was. After Pound's anthology presenting the group Des Imagistes of 1914, what had been a working program in poetry was fully launched as a literary fashion. That's it. And the idea of HD's being the most perfect craftsman of the new perfecti who had received the consolamentum proposition of the image had hearkened back to intellectual and emotional overtones of the symbolist era, even as it moved forward toward a functionalism that was in the modernist aesthetic to be anti-symbolist. Like symbolism, Pound's imagism had been conceived as a cult of the elect in art. But with the Imagist anthologies of 1915, 1916, and 1970, they're so bad. They really are. Edited by Amy Lowell. What did Pound call her? A beer garden poet, I think.
Yeah, beer hall, beer hall.
Beer hall poet, yeah. H.T. and Aldington, the Imagist movement became generalized and popularized, which is true. And oh, you want me to go on?
Yes.
The idea of image composition by musical phrase and the verbal economy were let go into the lowest common denominator of impressionism, vers libre, and everyday speech. By 1937, 25 years after the birth of Imagism, all reference to the word image, once defined as presenting an intellectual and emotional complex, had been dissipated, and the term had come to indicate whatever a poem brought a picture to the mind of the reader. Is that enough?
Well, he goes into holding Eliot to task.
Oh, we like to do that, don't we? We always want to hold Eliot to task.
Well,
It was not only an imagism, as Pound dubbed the heretical popularization, that the first character of the Eliot was a fucking really wonderful poet. You know, I'm not saying he wasn't a wonderful poet. He was just a he sold out. You know, like he had such a gift, but he was scared. He was, I mean, he was scared, cosmologically scared, and he went after HD and Pound and all of them. And he has a book called what Searching After Strange Gods, where he condemns the whole movement that came out of HD and Pound and Aldington's tea room work. Whatever they were, the images in Hume's poem Autumn, the ruddy moon that may be like a red-faced farmer peering over a hedge, or Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, the evening that may be like a patient etherized upon a table, are not mythopoeic in their operation or intent, not deepening our sense of the reality of moon or of evenings, but present extension of their author's wit, personal conceits, but present extension of their author's wit. In the work, it's true, right? I mean, let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Like, okay, so what does that do for you? Like, what is that? Where does that take you?
back into his ego.
Back
Well,
in that, well, he was a smart guy, and he was, you know, he had a way with words, that Tom.
But William Carlos Williams said that the wasteland was going to set American poetry back 100 years.
It did. It did set it back 100 years.
200.
Williams was absolutely right.
200. He was half
200.
right.
Okay. Well, Williams liked to exaggerate. He hated the wasteland. I mean, but even he recognized that the wasteland was incredible poetry. It was just pointed in the wrong direction. Um,
What was the Wasteland's title before Pound got a hold of it?
oh, I can't remember.
He does the police in many voices.
I've read the open. I mean, that there's that facsimile of the original manuscript that Pound edited. I don't know if you've seen that, but I've read the opening stanzas, and they were horrible, like just horrible. I mean, Pound really did make that poem.
But I wonder, Boyd, if this gets to what you were thinking about poetry being different than just connected to history, and if this somehow gets to that, and the mythopoeic is, I think, one of the phrases that Duncan is using to describe HD in this, what the difference is.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like the idea of like he does the police in different voices is one way of thinking about uh, a relationship to history, and a different way would be, I think, exactly what Mike has been describing in terms of Duncan and HD and this relationship to um, a way of establishing what poetry means as a way of thinking, and that way of thinking isn't just language or isn't just something that one can sort of pick up and put down, but is something which is connected to our idea of desire and our idea of what we want and our idea of eros, in a way that we fall for it. You know, we fall for the best of it, and we fall in love, and we fall in love as children. And so I think poetry is about connecting to us as being children, and I think that's part of what Duncan is trying to portray, right? So there's an idea of falling in love with poetry as a child. So, I'll stop there. And
Why? Why are you stopping there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that back of this, the Aerosmith too is also the Orpheus, and the notion of tapping into the primal forces and the what is it? The I think in the palimpsest chapter he kind of goes there, but where it's about stringing up the sinews of Typhon to make the rocks and trees and everything come together.
I found the quote that I was looking for. It's on page 83. From the overwrought eros, once the work begins, the form of a vital spirit flies up. Once the work begins, the form of a vital spirit flies up. Chaos itself, the abyss, but it is a block, is alive with that personal possibility. In its obscurity, chaos corresponds to the psychoanalytic unconscious, for the idea of the unconscious is also that of a vitality, that unless a man enters a colloquy with what cannot sensibly speak and take instructions from what he cannot know, may show itself as a deadly and deadening matter. But once he take faith in what he cannot see, from a world egg where once there was demonic chaos, the universe of creation comes forth. And as Jane Harrison observes in her prolegomena to the study of Greek religion, it is almost inevitable that there should emerge from the egg a bird god, a winged thing. And he says something else up above. He says, our sense of the universe is the stake, the ground of the poem, our sense of the universe. That's what I was it's been at the back of my mind through this whole discussion that the work has to do with the transformation of the sense of the universe. And that's like your whole being. It's not just an idea, it's a fundamental relationship.
And if I can just add to what I said, one of the things I've learned from Mike, and you guys should actually pick this book up. So measures. So this is a terrific work where he's talking about Duncan and Olson in a different way. And one of the things I've learned from him is how to connect what should be in many ways two disparate ways of thinking about of being in the world and being in the world as a poet. And yet he's able to bring those things together and allow us to understand them. And I really want to thank all of you for this sort of opportunity to think through this and allow me to understand Duncan in a way that I haven't understood before. And I was reading through Olson, who I've read through many times. But Olson is a poet who is just so on point all the time, just so on point. And it's really brilliant to like sort of read these things in connections in ways that you can understand what's happening in terms of poetry, not just as a sort of isolated event, but as a kind of consolation. And I think that's sort of what's taking place here. So I just wanted to thank you all and thank Mike for and Paul and everyone else here. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and everybody. Listen.
This is
oops. Yeah, thanks for the plug too, boy.
Busted there. There it is, Abe's book, Measure, Poetry and Knowledge. And
yeah, look at all those books they got rid of. People.
Anyway,
listen, let me just talk briefly about where we're going. I think we need to like pick up the pace. We have 3 sessions left after this, right?
Correct.
And I would like to spend the last 2 on nights and days. So that means we should push through the next 3 chapters, palimpsest, occult matters, and rights of participation for next week. Is that okay with people? We've had a nice leisurely start, but we should like put the pedal to the metal.
Say that again.
Sorry.
Not put the pedal to the metal. What was the reading?
Sorry.
Next 3 chapters.
3 chapters.
4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, 4, 5, and 6 for next week.
So that should take us to the end of book 1.
Yes.
So that's page 100 to page 199. So
yeah.
99 pages.
Yeah. We can do that, right?
We're going to find out.
Okay. All right, I got to go, guys. I have to get up at 4:30 in the morning and drive to my sheep herding lesson.
Far out. Thanks, Michael. Thank you all for this experience. I'm really grateful to have it, and it's just opening up so many channels for me. Thanks for your engaged participation in this.
It's been great. Yeah. Thank you all. See you in a week. We can write stuff on that.
Yeah.
Too.
That's ongoing. Yeah.
I'll be checking it. Okay. Goodbye.